Anika, a bright young woman from Jaipur, and Sheikh Khalid, a powerful Dubai tycoon, were bound together in a forced marriage that promised wealth but delivered terror, until their story ended in shocking bloodshed. Anika was born in the vibrant city of Jaipur, a place where tradition and modernity often collided. From an early age, she carried dreams that stretched far beyond the narrow lanes of her neighborhood. While other children played in the dusty courtyards, she spent her evenings with books borrowed from a local library. She dreamed of one day becoming a teacher, or perhaps traveling abroad to see the world she only read about in magazines. Her mind was full of possibility, but her reality was much different. Her father's small textile shop barely managed to cover household expenses, and her mother often worried about debts piling up. Though they loved their daughter, her family's greatest fear was how they would arrange her future. Education for girls was seen as secondary. What mattered most was securing a good marriage, one that could bring stability and respect. By the time Anika reached her early 20s, whispers of marriage proposals filled the air around her. Suitors came and went, none quite meeting her hopes. She resisted quietly, clinging to her ambitions, but she knew her family's patience was thinning. To them, her dreams were luxuries they could not afford. The pressure grew heavier when her father's business began to fail. Creditors visited their home, and her parents looked for solutions in every direction. Anika began to notice how their conversations shifted whenever wealthy prospects were mentioned. Her own wishes no longer felt like part of the discussion. It was during this fragile time that news of a powerful man from Dubai reached their doorstep. His name carried weight, his fortune seemed endless, and his proposal came with promises that could erase every financial worry her family had ever faced. For Anika, it marked the beginning of a path she never chose. The proposal from Dubai arrived like a storm, sudden and overwhelming. The man behind it was Sheikh Khalid, a figure known for his immense wealth and influence. To families in financial despair, his name sounded like salvation. The offer was presented not as a suggestion, but as a golden opportunity. Khalid promised security, luxury, and a future where Anika would never know struggle again. Along with the marriage came promises of business investments for her father and generous gifts that could lift them out of debt. For her parents, the decision seemed unquestionable. They saw only the glittering rewards and not the shadows behind them. Anika, however, felt a tightening in her chest the moment she heard his name. She had never met Khalid, yet photographs of him spoke volumes. He was decades older, his eyes sharp and commanding, a man used to bending people to his will. Still, her parents insisted this was the kind of proposal that came once in a lifetime. Relatives whispered praises of her fortune. Neighbors looked at her family with envy, and Anika's objections were drowned out in the noise of celebration. Within weeks, preparations were underway. Expensive clothes were purchased, jewelry was borrowed, and rituals were hurried through with little concern for her feelings. Her passport was prepared, her belongings packed, and her days suddenly counted down to departure. The more Anika resisted, the harsher the arguments at home became. She realized her life was no longer her own, her voice reduced to silence in decisions that would define her future. When the wedding finally took place, it was not filled with joy but with resignation. Soon after, she was flown to Dubai, leaving behind her dreams in Jaipur, stepping into a world she did not choose. When Anika first entered the Sheikh's grand mansion in Dubai, it felt like stepping into another world. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, walls were adorned with rare paintings, and wide glass windows overlooked manicured gardens with fountains that sparkled in the desert sun. Servants moved quietly through the hallways, ready to fulfill her every request before she even spoke. At first glance, it seemed like the kind of life people only read about in magazines. Her family's praises echoed in her mind, convincing her that she should feel lucky. Yet beneath the glittering surface, she felt the weight of invisible chains. The Sheikh made it clear from the beginning that her new life would be lived on his terms. Her movements were restricted to certain parts of the mansion, and leaving the estate without his permission was forbidden. Even calls to her parents were closely monitored, reduced to brief conversations that sounded more like formal reports than heartfelt exchanges. Anika's world, once filled with books, hopes, and friendships, shrank to silent rooms and guarded hallways. The abundance of riches did not comfort her. It only reminded her of how little freedom she had. Days turned into a blur of loneliness. She was dressed in the finest clothes, yet she felt like a doll displayed in a glass case. Every corner of the house was grand, but none of it belonged to her. Servants avoided eye contact, too afraid to speak freely. Nights were the hardest, as she lay awake in vast rooms that felt colder than any place she had ever known. What looked like paradise from the outside was, in truth, a cage gilded in gold, and Anika realized she had traded her dreams for silence and fear. Over time, the polished image of the Sheikh's world began to crack before Anika's eyes. At first, it was only whispers among the servants, conversations that quickly died when she entered a room. They spoke of other women, wives from different countries who had lived in the mansion before her. Some had left suddenly without explanation. Others had simply vanished. The unease that had always lingered in her heart deepened as she pieced together fragments of these stories. What began as suspicion soon turned into quiet dread. Her curiosity grew stronger with every passing day, especially after she noticed a particular door in the mansion that was always locked. The Sheikh never spoke of it, and the staff avoided mentioning it. One evening, while the household was distracted, she managed to slip inside. What she discovered was more terrifying than anything she had imagined. The room was dimly lit and smelled of dampness. Hidden away in closets and drawers were blood-stained garments and torn pieces of jewelry. Photographs of women she did not recognize were scattered across a desk, some marked with dates and notes. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves carried secrets too dark to reveal. Anika froze in shock, her hands trembling as she tried to understand what she was seeing. This was not the home of a respected leader, but a place that concealed horrors. The Sheikh's charm, his wealth, and his authority masked something far more sinister. Each discovery etched fear deeper into her soul, and she realized she was not just trapped in a loveless marriage. She might be living alongside a predator. From that moment forward, every sound in the mansion made her uneasy, and every glance from the Sheikh felt like a silent warning of what might happen if she dared to resist. Anika's fear eventually turned into determination. She knew she could not survive much longer in silence, and the secrets she had uncovered weighed heavily on her conscience. Each day, she hid fragments of evidence, photographs she had found, scraps of documents, and small details written into a hidden journal. She tucked these away in places the Sheikh would not think to look, always careful to act as though nothing had changed. Her plan was simple yet dangerous. Collect enough proof of his crimes, then find a way to escape. The opportunity she longed for appeared when she overheard discussions of a trip to India. The Sheikh was planning to accompany her to Jaipur for a brief visit to her family, more for appearances than affection. To Anika, it felt like her only chance. She imagined slipping away, showing her evidence to the authorities, and finally regaining control of her life. For weeks, she prepared, rehearsing every step in her mind. But the Sheikh was sharper than she realized. His eyes lingered on her more than usual, and his questions became pointed. One evening, while searching her room, he discovered a folded piece of paper from her journal. Though it revealed little, it was enough to raise his suspicion. From that day on, guards were assigned to follow her, and even the smallest freedoms were stripped away. She could no longer enter certain rooms, and her belongings were searched regularly. Her hope of escape grew dim, but her resolve did not falter. Instead, she began plotting again in silence, knowing one mistake could cost her life. The walls around her were closing in, and time was slipping through her hands like sand. The night the storm rolled over Dubai, the mansion's atmosphere grew heavier than the clouds outside. Rain struck against the tall windows, and lightning illuminated the corridors in flashes of white. Anika sat in her room, staring at the evidence she had collected over months, the journal, the photographs, and fragments of clothing she had hidden away. She knew if Khalid found them, it would seal her fate. The only option left was to destroy them before he could uncover the truth. With trembling hands, she began tearing pages, feeding them into a small flame she had created in a metal bowl. But fate turned against her. The Sheikh entered suddenly, his sharp gaze falling on the burning papers. His fury was immediate and violent. He lunged forward, grabbing at the documents, and the two struggled in the dimly lit room. Glass shattered as the table overturned, the sound echoing through the vast mansion. Servants remained frozen in fear outside the locked door, unwilling to interfere in their master's private affairs. The struggle grew desperate. Anika fought not just for freedom, but for survival. In the chaos, she reached for a heavy object on the floor, a broken shard from the shattered glass table. In a moment of instinct, she struck out, and the Sheikh collapsed. The silence that followed was deafening. Blood spread across the marble, mixing with the reflection of the storm's lightning. Anika stood frozen, the shard slipping from her hand, her breath ragged and unsteady. She had not planned for violence, yet had come to her doorstep. The man who had caged her lay lifeless before her, and the life she once knew was shattered beyond repair. Nothing would ever be the same again. The Sheikh's death shook Dubai like an earthquake. Within hours, police swarmed the mansion, and the story spread rapidly across the city. The official account painted Anika as a cold-blooded killer who had murdered her wealthy husband for greed. Powerful members of Khalid's family pushed this version of events, determined to protect their reputation and inheritance. For them, Anika was an outsider, a convenient scapegoat who could be silenced behind prison walls. She was taken into custody, her hands shackled as reporters shouted questions she could not answer. Yet the investigation soon uncovered details that did not align with the family's narrative. Detectives searching the mansion found the locked room Anika had discovered. Inside were the same chilling artifacts: blood-stained clothes, photographs of women, and personal items that hinted at lives cut short. These discoveries could no longer be hidden. Rumors turned into international headlines, and soon the case was being reported across India, the Middle East, and beyond. In court, the atmosphere was tense. The Sheikh's lawyers painted Anika as manipulative and ambitious, while her defense revealed the terrifying reality she had endured. Witnesses from the staff reluctantly came forward, admitting they had long feared their master and heard whispers of missing women. Each testimony added weight to Anika's claims. Her journal, though partially destroyed, still contained enough evidence to support her story. The trial became more than a murder case. It transformed into a battle between wealth and truth, power and survival. Every revelation chipped away at the image of the respected Sheikh, exposing him as a predator hidden behind riches. For Anika, the courtroom was not just a place of judgment. It was her only chance to reclaim her stolen life. The final verdict arrived after weeks of testimony and countless hours of deliberation. When the court declared that Anika had acted in self-defense, a wave of relief swept through her, though the scars of her ordeal remained etched deep within her heart. She was free, but freedom did not erase the horrors she had endured. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around her, their cameras flashing as they shouted questions about her future. To the world, she had become a symbol, an unwilling heroine whose story shone a light on forced marriages and hidden abuses of power. Back in Jaipur, her family struggled with shame. They had believed they were securing their daughter's future, yet their decision had delivered her into the hands of a man whose cruelty knew no bounds. Neighbors who once envied them now whispered of their greed. Though Anika forgave her parents, the distance between them lingered, built on choices that could never be undone. Anika chose not to return to her old home. Instead, she began a new life far from the shadows of both Jaipur and Dubai. She pursued the education she once dreamed of, dedicating herself to helping other women escape similar fates. Interviews, articles, and documentaries spread her story across the globe, turning her pain into a voice for change. The Sheikh's mansion, once a fortress of fear, remained standing but lifeless. Its empty halls became a haunting reminder of the lives silenced within its walls. For Anika, every memory of that place carried darkness, yet also strength. She had survived what many could not, and in doing so, she had transformed from a victim into a symbol of resilience, determined never to be silenced again.